I think this is likely to be the worst budget since the McKechnie budget of 1982.
Welcome back to Northern Perspective, everyone. I'm Cypher.
And I'm Fox. We've been waiting for it for weeks, and it's finally out and hot off the press. The 2024-2025 Canadian federal budget. We're not going to give you a super detailed examination of the budget, but we wanted to give you some of the main points of interest, as well as the potential impact on the economy and what it means for you.
Let's take a look. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is the federal budget. It is available online. You can find it in as a link in our description, as you can with all of our source material that we use in our videos. And this is not a document for the faint of heart. It is very, very long, as you would expect a budget to be. We're not going to go through every single point that is in here, but we did want to talk about some of the parts that have been a little more politicized as of late. So the first one we're going to look to is building more affordable homes. So they talk about a lot in here. New housing starts. They talk about they try and compare themselves to the Harper era, which is interesting how they do that.
Ridiculous, I think you mean to say.
Well, and they kind of fudge the numbers here. Like, it's I'm not even going to get into it because it's pointless. But what we are going to get into is one of the stolen ideas from the Conservatives, which is selling off government land. So one of the points here is building homes on public lands. The high cost and scarcity of land present scarcity of land in Canada.
We have the second largest landmass in the world.
Yeah.
I mean, I know, okay, it's fair to say that a lot of that is, I don't want to say uninhabitable, but not exactly desirable. There's no cities. There's no anything except wilderness. But yeah, we've got a lot of land.
Yeah, it's just an interesting way to say that. So they're saying that this presents barriers to Canadians. Since 2016, Canada Lands Company has enabled the construction of more than 10,300 new homes on underused federal land, including more than 1,100 affordable homes. Over the next 5 years, Canada Lands Company currently aims to enable the construction of over 29,200 new homes with a minimum of 20% affordable units. So, what does this mean? So, they're going to look at selling off these properties in order to open up land. They're going to spend $5 million over 3 years to support an overhaul of the Canada Lands Company to expand its activities to build more homes on public lands. And they're going to be spending $500 million over 5 years starting this year on a cash basis to Public Services and Procurement Canada, so PSPC, to launch a new public lands acquisition fund, because we need to spend a bunch of money for them to do that. $112.6 million over 5 years starting in this year, and $4.3 million in future years for the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation to top up the Federal Lands Initiative to unlock more federal lands. For some reason, they need to spend $100 million on that. And they want to, construct a bunch of homes in the different provinces, and this is what it kind of breaks down to. So there's over 11,700 Crown-owned properties in Canada. That means it's owned by the federal government, aka the Crown. So here's just a visual idea of where these properties are located. There's not 11,700 flags on this map, but you get the idea. So they're trying to take the conservative approach and do this, but it doesn't sound like they're going to be building these very quickly. So that's something that they're trying to do, and it seems like they're going to be spending, like a lot on something that it doesn't sound like it should be, have a lot of spending on it. Anyhow, I'm not really impressed with this part of the budget. Next is the infamous Pharmacare plan that isn't even in legislation yet. And it doesn't even sound like they can even sell anything until they get this new Canadian company up, the Canadian National Drug Agency, I believe it is, and they have to come up with a formulary, as we explained in our previous video. That's basically a repository or a list of medications that Canadians are allowed to buy, but it's only covering the older medications, which a bunch of Canadians don't really even use anymore.
Well, and my guess, just knowing what I do about medications and pharmacy and that sort of thing, is it's because those medications are no longer under patent. So they're going to be cheaper because there's going to be generics available.
Even though they may be less effective than the new formulas.
Right. I mean, if you look at, for example, medications used to treat depressions, MAOI inhibitors are a really old school medication. They didn't really work all that well. And there was a lot of things that you couldn't even eat while you were on them because there was different drug interactions. So, maybe they would support that and not the current slate of medications, which are SSRIs. Who knows? We don't know yet because there's no legislation yet because there's no Pharmacare plan yet.
Right. So they want to launch the first of a 5-phase national universal pharmacare, even though the bill does not talk about universal pharmacare. The bill only talks about 2 things, covering contraceptives and diabetes, right? So they talked about that. So what are they wanting to do? Well, they're wanting to provide quote-unquote free contraception, even though we know it's not free.
It's taxpayer funded.
And free insulin to save Canadians money. Well, not necessarily, right? It has to be covered. So what does this mean? Well, they want to propose $1.5 billion over 5 years, starting in 2025. But they don't really, break this down. So what it really comes down to is in year 1, they're only proposing to spend $49 million. Why would that be, you may ask? Well, it's because the legislation isn't even in yet, and the $49 million, that's probably just going to be used to set up this new federal company. So what does that mean? How many Canadians are going to get contraceptives and how many Canadians are going to get insulin this year? Probably 0. And if you recall, Jagmeet said, this is going to happen very, very quickly. That's not quickly to these people.
It's not quickly by any standard.
Right. It may be quickly by government bureaucracy standards. But again, who's to say when this is even going to pass? So if you're currently on an insulin injection or anything related to diabetes medication, don't count on anything in this fiscal year, unfortunately. So there's going to be a lot of just overspending in the committees, analyzing this, and it's just going to be a gong show, folks.
Well, and if you recall, Bill C-64, an act to respect Pharmacare, an act respecting Pharmacare, it said that once that bill is passed, then they'll make another bill within a year of Bill C-64 receiving royal ascension. They'll make another bill that is the actual Pharmacare bill. So how long is it going to take for Bill C-64 to get through the House and receive royal ascension? Well, both houses actually, and receive royal ascension. And then you've got a year from that date to implement another bill.
Well, this is probably why it's over 5 years. So you may not even see any medications until 5 years from now.
Exactly.
So there you go. So that's the Pharmacare side. Now, this is the most ridiculous part of the budget. So they're talking about reducing fees. What kind of fees, you may ask? Well, they're talking about reducing, hidden fees. And they go from talking about, protection against, the phone bills, right? So, you get your phone bills and, there's different fees that that are hidden in there, and internet, and bank fees, cell phone fees. That includes roaming and number change fees and insufficient fund fees, on bill payments and stuff like that. So that's bad. So we need to spend money to reduce or eliminate those fees. Here's the thing. Let's say you do. Let's say you eliminate all of those hidden transaction fees with the phone companies. What do you think's going to happen?
Bill goes up.
Your bill's going to go up 100%. Because they're just going to take it from you in another way. So they're going to spend a bunch of money, which is going to accomplish nothing. Now.
Yeah, it sounds like that instead of there being hidden fees, they just have to disclose them and you're still getting charged for it.
Yeah.
That's what I'm getting from this.
So this is their wonderful graphic. Oh, we're going to eliminate all of these nasty fees. See this pretty graphic? Yeah. All this is bad.
But are they saying they'll eliminate it, or are they just saying that they will disclose it to you? That it's not a hidden fee anymore, it's an upfront fee.
Well, so the government has made some significant progress to crack down on junk fees. The new Team Canada effort will ensure Canadians in every province and territory can save money by getting fairer prices and paying fewer fees.
So, but you're right. Once the phone company removes those individual line items, they're just going to bundle it in with the main plan.
Oh yeah, 100%.
So in the end, nothing's really going to happen.
Now, here's the next thing they want to do. Expanding high-speed internet to rural communities. In 2016, 84% of Canadians had access to high-speed internet. By 2022, this figure increased to almost 94%. This has been made possible in part because of a significant increase in access to rural areas, moving from 39% to 67% over this period. The government remains committed to its target of ensuring 98% of Canadians have access to high-speed internet. You know who really wasn't responsible for that increase? Government.
Yeah, it was Starlink, was it not?
Starlink is a major role player in the rural areas in Canada. It's actually launched in Canada before any other place on the planet, and they're expanding their coverage. And there was other providers that provided like radio based internet and satellite internet, that sort of thing. So, but we got to spend money. We got to spend money on it. But they don't really say how they're going to do that. And they're also going to say, well, we're going to make it so you don't have to spend a fee when switching between companies. How are you going to do that?
Is that like a contract break fee that they're talking about, or?
Sounds like.
So that you can break a contract without paying a fee. What's the point of a contract then?
Well, that's the point, right?
I mean, I'm not in favor of contracts. I'm just saying, like, if you can just break contracts without penalty, why have contracts?
Exactly. And now, let's talk about airlines. So we have all these airline fees, right? Okay. So they're saying Suzanne and Grant could pay up to $481 in additional fees as part of their trip. I guess. I guess you could. But it depends. A lot of people travel, and a lot of people know this, but some people don't travel. And you get surprised by this. Okay, fine. But they don't really say how they're going to do that. So it says Budget 2024 announces the government will strengthen transparency of fees for optional services. It'll do this by working with the Canadian Transportation Agency and airlines to ensure these fees are clearly laid out. What does that mean? Nobody knows.
Well, maybe that if you have an oversized bag, this is exactly how much it's going to cost you. Like, I have no idea. You and I don't really fly.
Well, but here's the other thing, and I'm going to get this. To this in a minute. So I'm going to ignore this part. Nothing is more important to Canadians right now than addressing concert and sport ticket fees.
You serious?
In the cost of living crisis that we're in, forget everything else. We have to address concerts. So, what's the government going to do? When it comes to that, the federal government will work with provinces and territories and encourage them to adopt a best practice requirements for ticket sales with 3 priority goals. Sales transparency, to continue to protect Canadians from unexpected charges through upfront all-in pricing, Stronger protections for Canadians, including against excess fees and better ensuring they get timely refunds and cracking down on fraudulent resellers. Great.
So people are dying in the streets. People are
Living in tents.
Well, people are living in tents, but people are also being assaulted, stabbed, shot. You know, typical thug stuff. And their concern is cracking down on scalpers.
Yep.
I read an article the other day that an individual who committed an assault against a child had to go free because there wasn't enough judges to try it, and they're worried about scalpers.
Yep.
What is wrong with our justice system?
Yep. Now, but wait, there's more. What else is important? Canadians should have a right to repair their digital devices.
Do you know what? This one I do agree with. Because have you ever broken something? And Apple's particularly bad for this. But have you ever broken something and you have to go back to the store where it came from, and they're going to charge you an arm and a leg because they know that they're the only ones able to repair it? And I honestly think that when we have something that breaks down, say like, I don't know, like a small appliance, like a food processor or something, and it's got a chip in it, so you can't fix it yourself. You have to throw it out, or you have to get it repaired where it came from the manufacturer. And half the time the manufacturer won't sell you the parts. So it's just waste. It's just garbage. So this is one thing I do agree with.
Right, but is now the right time to be going after it? Priorities, people.
Yeah, true, but I don't really see it as a bad thing. We'll just say that. So
now the interesting thing about all of these things, maybe aside from the device repair, is they have to work with the province on just about every one of these. They have to ask the provinces to cooperate with them. So again, what is this? This is government overreach into the provincial domain. Why? Because they can't do their own jobs properly. They can't manage the federal arena well at all. So they're going to try and reach in and steal some of the wins from each of the provinces. And then if it doesn't work, just like the $10 a day daycare, they can blame the provinces for it. That's what all this seems like to me. And again, why? Why are you doing this right now? Oh, wait. Could it be because Trudeau has lost all of his base, which is these young voters? So what is he trying to do? He's trying to get them all back. Because there's other pieces in here for, forgiving loans for child care educators, increasing bonds for students, and giving tons of money for education and all of this. All of this does not handle the affordability crisis.
No, it doesn't. This is like putting a Band-Aid on a bullet hole.
And I compare this to Doug Ford's Buck a Beer initiative that he used when he was first elected. Everyone probably remembers that.
Yeah, if you're in Ontario, basically Doug Ford said that there would be, dollar beers, that they would remove the taxes and make it cheap enough so that I guess you could get drunk off $25. I don't know.
Yeah, so it's a little odd that this is like the Buck a Year budget, and it seems to come in a non-election year. It's kind of curious to me, but anyhow, we'll just leave that there. Now, there's a whole bunch more, but we don't want this video to be too long. So, how much is all of this going to cost? So, here is the ledger for the government's expenses, and it breaks everything down. So we're in here. We're in 2024, 2025, and this all breaks down to a whopping $534.6 billion budget. That's how much this costs. Oh, I'm sorry. That that was excluding some of the losses. So it's $537.6 billion loss. Excuse me. Now, in terms of the revenues, what does that end up? What's the net? right? Well, so with all the revenue that the government gets, the total budget deficit is going to be around 39.8 billion.
And by revenue, we mean tax dollars.
Tax dollars and any other type of revenue that may come in for that, bonds and all the rest of it. So we are in a deficit, again, of exactly the same as last year. Now, you may say, wait a minute, how are they going to pay for all of this? Because there seems like there's a lot of new spending in there, and you would be right. Even though it's spread out over 5 years with a lot of these things, how are they going to do that and keep the budget relatively flat? Well, that brings us to Chapter 8. Tax fairness. For
Fairness.
every generation.
Oh, of course.
So we are definitely not going to leave the government to explain, what this is. But we did want to show you a video of former Bank of Canada Governor David Dodge, and wanted to give you his take. Now, this guy was a liberal, just bear in mind. But this is his take on the budget and how they're going to pay for it.
She's going to tax us. If indeed she is going to keep to the spending numbers, which she has promised, and if she's going to keep to the budget deficit. So the right thing to do, because the problem at the moment is we're not investing enough, we're consuming too much, would be to tax consumption. That she's sworn she won't do. And so what she's going to try to do is to do something that will slow down the very investment, which is going to raise Canadian standard of living over time by taxing at the margin the corporations and the individuals that are going to make the investments that will help grow the economy.
So that is very, very important. And Mr. Dodge is right on. Now, some of you out there may look at these corporations and you may curse at them, you may hate them, but they provide jobs.
And that's important.
So you have corporations out there that, they make a lot of money, but they provide a lot of jobs. The bigger the corporation, the more money they make, but the more jobs they provide to Canadians. And when you tax really, really wealthy people even more, now the highest tax bracket is 53.8% of every dollar.
That means the government gets more of your money than you do.
Right.
That's nuts.
Right? So just bear that in mind. And there's already a capital gains tax, meaning when you sell something, just for pure profit, you pay capital gains on it. So it's already at something like 26%. Now they want to increase that to like 33%. So what does that mean? Well, now these people that have all this money that actually use it to invest in potential businesses and other areas of Canada to stimulate the economy, provide more jobs, they're going to be less inclined to do that. Corporations, they're also going to be less inclined to do that because what happens? Well, when you tax a corporation, you eat into, what is that word? Profit.
Profits.
And they are going to get that profit back one way or the other. So what are the ways that a corporation gets profit back? Number one, we all know this one, increase price on consumers, which contributes to inflation. So that's number one. Number two is they can just be charitable and not eat into the profit.
That hardly ever happens.
Right. The other thing that they can do is not invest as much into the Canadian market. They could also pull out of the Canadian market because it just becomes unaffordable.
Right. They could just up and leave. That's what the Liberals don't seem to understand or don't seem to care, is that if you overtax corporations and wealthy people, they're just going to up and leave because they have the means to do so.
What you're also doing is you are providing a disincentive for new corporations to come into Canada. Why would they when the taxes are so high? And lastly, what you also do is you crush wage growth within Canada. Because if you have less money to spend on your corporate expenses, the highest corporate expense in any company is payroll. So what does that mean? Well, sorry, Jimmy, we were going to give you a raise of 2% this year, but sorry, that's going to go down to 0.5% because the government is taxing us. Unfortunately, it is what it is. Sorry, Jimmy, we're all getting hit by this. So now you're actually making the long-term housing affordability problem even worse because wages are not keeping up with expenses.
Well, you're making the long-term affordability crisis as a whole even worse. I mean, groceries keep going up because of the carbon tax, and if you're not getting a raise because of these new corporate taxes, we're all in trouble. Like, it's just going to get worse.
How can you be sure that that will slow? I think what I interpret from what you're saying is that will slow economic growth. Why?
It will slow economic growth over the medium term. And why precisely is it? Because what we need to do is to raise the amount of capital per worker so that we can raise the productivity of individual workers. That's the only way we're going to raise incomes of Canadians over time. And you cannot get there simply by saying, well, we're going to ask Canadians to spend more now. That will not raise the incomes in the future. In fact, that will condemn us forever and ever to what Canadians feel at the moment, the fact that there has been no real growth in the economy for the past 10 years because we have not made investments in the equipment and the intellectual capital that workers need. Surprisingly, Vasi, we in Canada have overinvested compared to every other country, compared to the United States, compared to Australia. We have overinvested in housing. A far too large share of our national income and a large share of our savings has gone to housing, with the effect that too little has gone to machinery, equipment, and intellectual capital for workers to work with.
I do take your point, Mr. Dodge, on the lack of investment on the business side, but I think to play devil's advocate for a second, if the government didn't, I don't know if the right word is invest, but didn't address in some capacity the issues around housing, there would be protests in the streets at this point. Like I can recall a year ago when they were saying, well, it's not really our jurisdiction, and the blowback was fierce and it was fast.
Well, the way to address it is to increase saving. But we're moving in exactly in the wrong direction, Betsy. This, I was saying to someone earlier, I think this is likely to be the worst budget since the McKechnie budget of 1982, in the sense of pointing us in the wrong direction as to how we go about raising the incomes of Canadians and actually making Canadians feel better over the medium term.
So what is he saying there? He's right. We've invested billions and billions and billions of dollars in housing, and it's gotten us nowhere. Why?
Because they keep bringing more and more and more people into the country. We already don't have enough homes. Why are you bringing more people who need homes?
Well, and all you're doing is feeding bureaucracy. You're not building homes. And to his point, you're not bringing in the intellectual capital, the people into the country that are actually going to build this stuff. You're not bringing in the right people. You're bringing in everybody. And then you're giving them money to come into the country. And then 30% of them are walking away with our money.
Yeah, something like 1/3 of new Canadians leave within the first 2 years because Canada isn't the Canada that they were sold.
Right. So, and you don't have to take our word for it in terms of the taxes. Here's an article for the Globe and Mail, and they actually use some of the graphs that are in the budget. But you look at this. So this is the budgets, and this is the deficit budget in billions of dollars. So you can see where the COVID budget was, and we're here now. They're saying next year it's not really going to go down too much, but the year after that it will, and the year after that it will go higher than that, less than that, then less than that. But this is all dependent on these quote unquote corporate taxes. They're banking a lot on these, I think it's over $20 billion they're expecting to get in revenue. They're not going to get that, especially off of taxing, the wealthy people and their capital gains. No way. You think they're just going to sit there and say, oh, sure, we'll just pay more taxes? It's not going to happen. You're going to have either the wealthy people leave, or they're going to manage their money away from these taxes. What does that mean? Less investments in Canada. And it's a net loss for the economy and productivity. Same thing for the corporations. Right? So they even say, no path to balance. This year's budget, like other recent budgets, does not include plans to end debt finance spending.
Of course not. Because that was never a goal, was it?
That means printing money. That's what that means. And what happens when you print money?
Inflation.
You get inflation. Right? So you still have the government fighting the same amount for inflation as they did last year. And it's probably going to be worse because, again, they're anticipating all of these new revenues. I don't think they're going to come because I don't think you're going to get the taxes that you think you're going to get. Corporations are going to spend less, which means you're probably going to see a much lower margin of capital gains revenue coming into the country to offset that deficit. So you may not end up with a $40 billion deficit. You may end up with a $50 billion, $60 billion deficit. So, this is what we're talking about here, folks.
This is reckless, is what it is. It's completely irresponsible.
Right. So, anyhow, this is where the budget is. Now, the interesting thing is that Ipsos did a survey, and they asked Canadians, what do you want? What do you want to see in the from the 2024 federal budget? What do you want to see? This is what they said. So, 44% of people said they want help with the rising cost of living. 38% said they want investments in healthcare. 33% said they want to reduce personal income taxes. 20% they said they want to freeze the carbon tax. 19% they want a reduction in overall government spending, and 18% said they want to reduce the deficit. So the top 6 priorities, the government achieved 0.
Well, I suppose you could argue that the Pharmacare thing is an quote-unquote increase in healthcare spending. However...
They're not going to realize it, though.
Right. We're not going to see that for several years, we imagine, as we discussed earlier in the video.
Right. So this just shows, and we all knew this, how out of touch this Liberal government is with what Canadians actually want. Now, you know, there's some other pieces in here where, they're going to throw more money at the $10 a day childcare, and they're going to go throw more money at some of the other initiatives that they have, but it's not going to help with cost of living. One of the things they want to do is forgive the loans of early childhood educators to kind of stimulate the daycare industry. Well, again, it is so brainless because you are killing the childcare industry by promising all this money to these childcare centers, and they're not getting the required money to actually keep them open. So they closed. So the problem isn't there's not necessarily enough childhood educators, there's not enough daycare centers. Because you killed it. So, this is the 2024 budget, everybody. Now, Jagmeet was asked about this, and of course he was like, well, I don't know if we're going to vote for this yet because, we're going to ask some tough questions to the Prime Minister. Yeah, you go ask your tough questions. You go ask your tough questions.
I am cautiously optimistic because to me, it sounds like he has an option. And maybe for once he'll smarten up and pick the right option, the option that Canadians want, and send us to an election. He's not obligated to vote with the Liberals this time, from what it sounds like. And it sounds like he wasn't too happy with the budget, but who knows? Again, with this guy, you know, we think he's going to do one thing and then he just defies all logic and does the opposite. So I'm not completely pessimistic. I am cautiously optimistic that maybe, just maybe, this budget will not pass. So
I have another theory, but I'm not going to talk about it here. I think Jagmeet's going to vote for this, so maybe that means he's not. So who knows?
One of us has to be, right?
Who knows? But anyway, let us know the what your reaction is in the comments. But it's definitely a dog's breakfast of a budget, and we can only hope that it will be Trudeau's last.